नमस्कार, मैं हूं अनामिका सिंह। आई एम अ सीनियर रिसर्च फेलो फ्रॉम रीजनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ एजुकेशन मैसूरू। आज हम फिर से जुड़े हैं हमारे सीटेट एग्जाम की तैयारी के लिए। सो इन टुडेज सेशन वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग लैंग्वेज पेपर 1 एंड पेपर 2 के जो कुछ कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं जो कॉमन हैं दोनों ही पेपर्स में, एंड वी विल सी द टॉपिक्स दैट आर रोल ऑफ लिसनिंग एंड स्पीकिंग, function of language, and also how children use it as a tool when it comes to their teaching learning process, and also how they use it in their everyday life. Now let us get into the very first concept that we have here with us. So listening is basically one of the very first skills which we develop when it comes to language learning. It also happens naturally. बच्चा सबसे पहले सुनता है लैंग्वेज को और वो अपने आप होता है, एक ऑटोमेटिक नेचुरल प्रोसेस है। और हम ये जो लैंग्वेज है उसको रिसीव करते हैं हमारे ऑडिटरी ऑर्गन्स की मदद से। एंड व्हाट वी डू इज वी आइडेंटिफाई सर्टेन साउंड्स ऑफ स्पीच एंड देन वी प्रोसेस इट इनटू वर्ड्स एंड सेंटेंसेस। तो पहले हमें सिर्फ और सिर्फ वो एक साउंड की तरह पता चलेगा, फिर धीरे धीरे उन साउंड्स को हम एसोसिएट करके वर्ड्स बनाएंगे and followed by making a proper sentence. So in order to learn speech, we should also know rhythm and pronunciation. And ये सारी चीज़ें सीखने के लिए सबसे important है an effective way of listening. That is why listening becomes a very important process in learning of language. The definition of listening according to International Listening Association is listening is the process of receiving, constructing meaning from and responding to spoken or non-verbal messages. तो जो भी चीज़ें हम सुनते हैं उसको हम प्रोसेस करके एक रेस्पॉन्स देने के लिए वो हमारा इंटेंशन है. So this is what listening is defined as. So there are basically two types of listening. The first one is discriminative listening. तो डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव लिसनिंग इज द वन दैट वी हैव इनिशियली. सबसे पहले हम ये वाला लेवल ऑफ लिसनिंग में जाते हैं जिसमें हम सिर्फ इतना सीखते हैं चीज़ों को सुनना, एंड वी फोकस ऑन डिफरेंट साउंड्स एंड देन वी मे और मे नॉट अंडरस्टैंड द मीनिंग ऑफ इट प्रॉपरली, बिकॉज दिस इज डेवलप्ड बहुत ही शुरुआत के दिनों में. जब हम लोग कम उम्र के होते हैं उस टाइम ये स्किल डेवलप होना शुरू हो जाती है. तो हम डिस्क्रिमिनेट करते हैं साउंड्स के बीच में, बट हमें उसे पूरी तरह समझना अभी तक नहीं आया है. बट हम वो साउंड्स को सेलेक्ट करके जो सिमिलर साउंड्स हैं उनको एक साथ रखते हैं. ये सारा प्रोसेस चलता रहता है. द दूसरा टाइप जो है वो है कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिसनिंग. कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिसनिंग में जैसा कि वर्ड में ही दिया हुआ है कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव, मतलब कॉम्प्रिहेंड करना या समझना या फिर पूरा जो भी चीज़ें लिसनिंग में इन्वॉल्व है उसको एड्रेस करना. सो इन कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिसनिंग वी अंडरस्टैंड द मैसेज, the fundamental to all listening subtypes. So it is very important for us to comprehend what is being said so that we can do other things based on the message that we have received, like responding to the message, thinking over that message. So these are some of the important things. So this particular comprehensive listening, it requires good vocabulary and also basic language skills. That is why we have discriminative listening first and then we move on to comprehensive listening. So certain examples if we want to see for discriminative and comprehensive. सो डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव के लिए जब हम सुबह सुबह सो के उठते हैं तो हम बहुत सारी चिड़िया को चर्प करते हुए सुनते हैं. कभी कभी द चिकन इज़ मेकिंग अ साउंड. सो ये सारी जो साउंड्स हैं उनको हम आइडेंटिफाई कर पा रहे हैं, वो हमारे डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव लिसनिंग के अंडर आएगा. उसके बाद कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव जो कि एक हायर लेवल है. कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव में लिसनिंग के साथ साथ हमें थोड़ा बहुत मैसेज को समझना, उसको रिस्पॉन्ड करने के लिए तैयार होना और साथ में बातचीत करना, ये सारी चीज़ें आते हैं. तो लिसनिंग टू अ स्टोरी कैन बी वन ऑफ द एग्जाम्पल. Following instructions that are given by someone else, understanding a conversation that you're having with your friend or your teacher, listening to news और अनाउंसमेंट्स. तो जब भी हम उन्हें सुनते हैं हम कुछ ना कुछ कॉम्प्रीहेंड कर रहे हैं, हमें कुछ चीज़ें पता चल रही है, हमारे पास सर्टेन इन्फॉर्मेशन आ रहा है, तो इसलिए ये सारी चीज़ें इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो बेसिकली लिसनिंग एक बहुत ही नेचुरल प्रोसेस है. दिस इज़ वन ऑफ द ओरल मेथड्स दैट वी हैव इन ऑर्डर टू लर्न लैंग्वेज. एंड इसके दो टाइप्स हैं. पहला डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव लिसनिंग, दूसरा कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिसनिंग. डिस्क्रिमिनेटिव लिसनिंग जो शुरुआत होती है हमारी लैंग्वेज सीखने की, वहाँ पे पाया जाता है. फिर धीरे धीरे वी मूव ऑन टू कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव लिसनिंग. सो दिस इज द आइडिया. मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट. We have certain essential condition for listening skills, and there are certain aims of listening skill. So there are basically various essential condition for listening skills. The first one is be attentive. So it is important for the listener to be attentive in order to receive the message well. The next one is appropriate volume of speech or sound. हमारे लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि जो भी हम सुन रहे हैं वो साउंड या फिर क्या कहा जा रहा है उसका वॉल्यूम अप्रोप्रिएट हो. अगर हम ढंग से सुन पाएंगे तभी हम उसे समझकर उसको रिस्पॉन्ड कर सकते हैं. The next essential condition is having normal hearing organs so that they can perform their functions properly and you can receive the message well. The next one is listening without judging or criticizing. जब भी हम किसी की कोई बात सुनते हैं या हम कुछ टीवी पे देख रहे हैं या कुछ न्यूज़ आ रहा है, तो हमारा जो इनिशियल माइंडसेट होना चाहिए, वी शुड बी ओपन टू लिसनिंग द मैसेज दैट दे आर बीइंग imparting here. So when this is happening, we should not have certain prejudgmental thoughts in us and we should be open to listening. After we have comprehended the whole message, then we can judge and respond to it. That is why while listening, we should do it without judging or criticizing. The next condition is understand the meaning of words. So, which is what we are talking about in comprehensive listening. Only if I am able to understand the word and its meaning, I will get the message that is being sent here. And then only I can respond to it well. That is why this also becomes an essential condition. The last one here is interest of the learner matters. So the learner should be interested in listening to the particular talk, in listening to the discussion that is happening. This we also saw in our other lessons where we were talking about the motivation or the interest of the learner. It becomes very important if we are disinterested. Even if we are listening to it as sounds, we may not be able to comprehend what is being said. So we should be available, we should be present, and we should be interested in a conversation for us to actually enhance our listening skills. Next part that we need to look into is what are the aims of listening skills, or why it is important for us to have good listening skills. So basically the aim of listening skills is to understand and infer concepts, ideas, facts by merely listening. If we listen well, we can comprehend them easily. So this is one of the aims. Then the next purpose of listening to someone is we identify the speaker's purpose and tone. कई बार ऐसा होता है कि हम सामने वाले से बात कर रहे होते हैं और वो जिस तरीके से हमसे बात करता है, जिस टोन में हमसे बात करते हैं, उसी से हमें पता चल जाता है कि उनका इंटेंशन क्या है. उनके मैसेज के कई सारे नुआंसेस जो होते हैं वो हमें वहीं पे समझ में आ जाते हैं. The next aim of listening skill will be to facilitate verbal interaction between people. So this is very common and very widely understood. हम जब भी किसी को सुनते हैं तो there is in this communication process the important role of listening is as important as it is to respond. So only when we listen to the verbal interaction properly, we can respond verbally to the person who has spoken to us. So it becomes a two-way communication. So for this also, listening skills are very important. Also, listening skills will lay the foundation of how we learn any language for that matter, all the more for language too. So when we are reading something or when we are listening to certain people, so if you see, listening is one of the initial things that happen when it comes to communication or learning of a language. So the amount of exposure also depends on how much we have listened to a particular language, and that is why it will lay the foundation for learning a language. So these are some of the important points. Moving on to the next part. There are various strategies to focus on the listening process. So we have three different timelines of a particular listening process. There is before listening, during listening, and after listening. So we need to keep in mind certain of these strategies and know that what should we be doing in this particular phase of the listening process. So before listening, we should set a purpose. We should activate our prior knowledge. We can listen to the topic and predict what this is going to be about, and we choose a particular listening strategy. Do I have to give my complete attention to what is being said, or I need to just listen to specific words and phrases and take out the main information? तो बिफोर लिसनिंग का एक एग्जाम्पल ये हो सकता है, जब भी हम कोई स्टोरी पढ़ाने जा रहे हैं उसमें हम स्टोरी का टाइटल पहले बताते हैं। तो जब हम उसका टाइटल बताते हैं, बच्चे उसको प्रिडिक्ट कर सकते हैं कि ये स्टोरी किस चीज़ के बारे में होगी। तो ये हमारा स्टोरी के अंदर का जो भी कहानी है उसको समझने के पहले का जो हमारा डिस्कशन है वो बिफोर लिसनिंग है। उसके बाद हम आते हैं ड्यूरिंग लिसनिंग वाले प्रोसेस में, जो कि काफ़ी इम्पॉर्टेंट फेज़ है लिसनिंग का। वी विल वेरीफाई। सो in the initial before listening phase, we are not predicting what this is about. We are just listening to the topic and thinking, okay, ये हो सकता है, इसमें शायद इस कहानी में हम इस बारे में बात करेंगे। तो जब हम ड्यूरिंग लिसनिंग वाले प्रोसेस में पहुंचते हैं तो हमें वेरीफाई करना है जो भी हमने वहाँ पर प्रिडिक्ट किया था क्या वो सही है। अगर वो सही नहीं है तो वो और क्या है, वो प्रिडिक्शंस को चेक करना है। फिर हमें जो फोकस करना है वो जो की आइडियाज़ है, जो भी हमारा डिस्कशन है उसके की आइडियाज़ पे फोकस करना है। We can ignore the minor details or the fillers which are not essential or is not the objective of us listening in this particular activity. We also should re-listen if needed. As in when you are listening to something and it wasn't clear, we should re-listen or we should ask for clarification. So there are various examples that we can think of here when it comes to activities during the listening process. So one of the example is listen for the main message rather than every single word. So when we listen to the news, for a matter of fact, we choose the specifics of what has happened, where it has happened, to whom it has happened, now what is being done. So we just need those specific pointers for us to understand this whole context. That is why in the listening process, we need to focus on the key ideas. The last phase of this will be after listening. So after listening, you should check how much you have understood, and whatever you have understood, you should reflect on that, and then we will evaluate whether what we have understood through our listening is actually correct or not. And then there can be certain areas which are difficult for us to understand or navigate through. So we will identify different areas so that we can improve on them next time. So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind during the listening process. So when it comes to strategies to focus on listening process, we also need to make sure that authentic materials and situations are being given to students so that it will prepare them for real world listening outside the classroom. So whenever we are planning an activity in our classroom, we should keep in mind that the student has to go and use these skills in the real world. So the materials that we use, the situations that we give them, it should be simulated to real life examples as well. So coming to two of the ways of communication that we have and how, what is the goal in each of these communication. वन वे कम्युनिकेशन. सो वन वे कम्युनिकेशन हम ज़्यादातर देखते हैं रेडियो पे, टीवी पे, या फिर पब्लिक अनाउंसमेंट्स, स्पीचेस, या फिर ट्रेन स्टेशंस पे वो ट्रेन नंबर अनाउंस करना, फ्लाइट, एयरपोर्ट पे फ्लाइट के डिटेल्स देना, कौन से प्लेटफॉर्म पे कोई रेलगाड़ी आ रही है, ये सारी चीज़ों को हम वन वे कम्युनिकेशन कहते हैं, क्योंकि इसमें सिर्फ इन्फॉर्मेशन एक साइड से आ रही है, आपको उसको केयरफुली लिसन करना है और अंडरस्टैंड करना है. तो वन वे कम्युनिकेशन के कुछ जो स्पेसिफिक गोल्स होते हैं वो आइडेंटिफाइंग द लिसनिंग गोल. वी शुड अंडरस्टैंड व्हाई वी आर लिसनिंग, व्हाट इज द ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ दिस इंफॉर्मेशन दैट आई एम लिसनिंग टू. देन वी विल रिकॉग्नाइज प्रेडिक्टेबल सीक्वेंसेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन. इसका एक एग्जाम्पल, अगर आपने कभी कस्टमर सर्विस को कॉल किया है तो उसमें आपको पता है कि वो हमें लैंग्वेजेस के लिए ऑप्शन देते हैं, तो लैंग्वेज 1 फॉर दिस, प्रेस 2 फॉर दिस। तो हम प्रिडिक्ट कर सकते हैं वो सीक्वेंसेस को वाइल लिसनिंग टू देम। द नेक्स्ट इज आइडेंटिफाई की वर्ड्स और फ्रेजेस टू लिसन फॉर। जैसे कि हम पहले डिस्कस कर रहे थे, अगर कोई न्यूज़ है, कहीं पे कुछ हादसा हुआ है, तो उसमें हम पहले उसके सिर्फ की वर्ड्स और फ्रेजेस को सुनेंगे, ताकि हमें पता चल जाए ये हादसा कहाँ पे हुआ है, किसके साथ हुआ है, कब हुआ है। ये सारे इंपॉर्टेंट डिटेल्स हमारे लिए जानना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि हमें क्विक इन्फॉर्मेशन चाहिए ताकि हम उसे चेक कर सके या वेरीफाई कर सके और लोगों को भी बता सके उसके बारे में। So the next kind is two-way communication. In two-way communication, as the very word only suggests us that there are two people involved and from both ways communication will happen. It can be between one individual, it can be between one and a group, it can be between many and one single person. So this is a two-way communication, as in there is a receiver, there is a sender, and both of them are interacting one by one after another. So the sources of input is important when it comes to two-way communication. So it is the teacher's talk, you will do various listening activities, you will do reading passages, and real life language outside classroom. These are all the inputs for our two-way communication. What we need to focus on when it comes to all of these activities is we should focus on the content, which is what the information is being shared. But we will also have to focus on the vocabulary that is being used, the pronunciation that is being used, and the grammatical structure that are being used here. That is how we will enhance our listening capabilities and also comprehend a message well in order to respond to it well. So this is what is important when it comes to strategies to focus on listening process. Moving on to the next part. Now we will look at the next skill, which is also very important, which is the speaking skills. So we have finished our discussion on listening skill. Now we are moving on to speaking skill. So speaking is basically a productive and expressive skill in oral mode. So we express ourselves and we produce sounds in order to tell a particular message or deliver it to someone that is in front of us. Speech is produced by the airstream from the lungs. So when we talk, there are certain speech organs which work together for us to be able to speak and give out sounds. Speaking is an act of conversing or expressing thoughts and feelings. It is also notice that the ability to speak can be enhanced. So there are a lot of us who feel shy when we come forward to talk. So if we work on the speaking skills of children from the very early years, they will be able to enhance their speaking abilities and also be more confident when they talk in front of a larger group or even talking in their classrooms. Okay, so now we will look at types of speaking situations. In various situations, how do we speak? What is our role? And how much of the speaking is actually happening? So the first kind is the interactive. So in the interactive speaking situation, there is face-to-face conversation, there is telephonic conversation. So there is an interaction that is must in this kind of situation. The next one is partially interactive situation. So in partially interactive, it is already understood that the person that are involved here, you can only participate in it partially. So there is very little interaction that is possible here. So it can be public speech where the audience does not interrupt in between the session. So the audience can ask something at the end. So it is only partially interactive, or they may ask questions which can be answered as a mass or a group, like yes or no. The next kind of situation that arises for speaking is non-interactive. So in this non-interactive speaking situation, there is no interaction involved. There is no scope for the other person to respond. For example, recording a speech for a radio broadcast. So when it comes to non-interactive speaking situation, in this there is no amount of interaction that happens. So an example for this can be recording a speech for a radio broadcast, or recording a certain video, recording a certain lecture wherein the audience cannot interact with you. That is the third kind of speaking situation. Moving on to the next part. Speaking skills, there are certain essential conditions. Like we saw in listening, there are certain essential conditions for speaking skills as well. So, the first one is the accent. The accent with which we speak is also important for us to actually deliver the message effectively. Finding one's voice, trying to make sure that the message that you have and the amount of volume you should use to deliver that message is also important. And the next one is the effect of breath on voice and speech. Sometimes when we are breathing heavily, we may not be able to communicate simultaneously. A lot of the times जब आप कहीं कुछ भाग दौड़ करते हैं या खेलते टाइम जब आप बात करने की कोशिश करते हैं तो वी विल बी शॉर्ट ऑफ ब्रेथ, तो हमारा जो मैसेज है वो अच्छे से डिलीवर नहीं हो पाता है. सो नेक्स्ट वन इज वोकल प्रोडक्शन. तो इस वोकल प्रोडक्शन में 3 चीज़ें इंपॉर्टेंट है: वॉल्यूम, क्लैरिटी एंड वेराइटी. सो आप किस वॉल्यूम में बात कर रहे हैं, आप इतना क्लियरली अपना मैसेज डिलीवर कर रहे हैं, एंड आपने कितने वेराइटी ऑफ वोकेबलरी को यूज़ किया है, या फिर आप कितना अपना वॉइस मॉड्यूलेशन कर रहे हैं, वो इम्पॉर्टेंट है यहाँ पर. उसके बाद आता है नेक्स्ट कंडीशन विच इज एप्रोप्रिएट जेस्चर्स वाइल स्पीकिंग. तो एप्रोप्रिएट जेस्चर्स वाइल स्पीकिंग, वी हैव ऑलवेज कोटेड दिस एग्जाम्पल. तो इफ आई एम सेइंग येस एंड आई एम सेइंग नो, आई एम सेइंग समथिंग ओरली वर्बली, कुछ और मैं कह रही हूँ और मेरे जेस्चर्स कुछ और कह रहे हैं. तो ये जो हमारा कन्फ्यूजन आता है जब ऐसा हम करते हैं, उसको अवॉइड करने के लिए हमें एप्रोप्रिएट जेस्चर्स को एप्रोप्रिएट स्पीकिंग वर्ड्स से एसोसिएट करना है. द नेक्स्ट पार्ट इज एम्स ऑफ स्पीकिंग स्किल्स. What are the aims and why should we try to enhance speaking skills? Why should we learn to speak better? So, develops the habit of speaking sentences clearly and comprehensively. So, we will be able to speak well, we will be able to tell our message clearly so that everyone else can understand or comprehend what we are saying. स्पीकिंग स्किल्स का एक और एम ये है, जो भी हम फील कर रहे हैं वो सारे इमोशंस को हम स्पीच और सेंटेंसेस में दूसरों को डिलीवर करें. इसके बाद उसका नेक्स्ट एम है to be able to critically evaluate ideas and beliefs of others and to draw logical conclusions. When we are speaking, we will also listen to what others are saying, and then for us to critique something that someone else has said, we will require good amount of speaking skills and a lot of vocabulary that is needed to in this particular context. The next is the speaking skill will enable the use of correct words, spellings, stress, rhyme, fluency, pause and appropriate phonetic transcription. जिनका स्पीकिंग स्किल्स अच्छा होगा वो लोग कब कितना इंटोनेशन, उनके वर्ड्स, उनके स्पेलिंग्स, सारी चीज़ें अच्छे से जानते हैं, क्योंकि जब हम वर्ड का स्पेलिंग और उस वर्ड का साउंड को एसोसिएट करते हैं तभी हम उस वर्ड को अच्छे से प्रोनाउंस कर पाएंगे. Another aim, which is the overall aim of why we should be teaching speaking skills in our classroom, is to make the learner a good and confident speaker so that they don't feel shy when they come in front of a larger group to talk. Now, we will look at strategies for developing speaking skills. So, there are various strategies which will help us build language knowledge and also the confidence while using it. So, we can look at it at various means. As and when the learner is shy, they are in the initial stages of learning a language, learning to speak a language, they may be little hesitant. So, in such a case, what the teacher can do is give them a stock of minimal responses, जो वो जब भी ज़रूरत पड़े तो यूज़ कर सकते हैं. वी शुड आस्क देम टू फोकस, जो भी कहा जा रहा है उस पर ध्यान दो, अच्छे से उसे सुनो और समझो, और क्या कहना है या कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड करना है उसके लिए चिंता करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. और जो स्पेसिफिक सेट ऑफ हमने स्टॉक ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सेज दिए हैं उनको यूज़ कर सकते हो डिफरेंट एक्सचेंज सिचुएशंस में. द नेक्स्ट वन इज़ रिकॉग्नाइजिंग स्क्रिप्ट्स. So, there are certain situations wherein we know what we have to do. and we can recognize the situation and the script and the pattern and then respond accordingly. Like whenever we meet someone, we know that we will be greeting them. It can be good morning, namaste, hello. So this is predictable. We know that we will be doing this in this situation. So the strategy here would be to recognize the script, recognize the situation. It will help us predict what to hear and also what to say. This will be very useful for us to interact with others, and it will also build our confidence in real life communication. The next one is using language to talk about language. So, there are a lot of students who don't feel confident enough to come forward and talk, especially when it comes to the second language. So, what we can do is we can use clarification phrases to ask for or give understanding. So, whenever I have not understood, I will use the language I have to inquire or ask a question that I have not understood this particular information. Please repeat it. So here I am using the language in order to understand language better. And this particular way will encourage learners to overcome their shyness and ask questions confidently. It will also create an authentic practice environment in the classroom, and it will encourage a lot of discussion and interactions in the classroom. What this will ultimately do is it will build confidence for real life communication outside the classroom. So, the more the child is given the opportunity to talk, to ask questions in the classroom, he or she will be able to also translate it in their real life and talk and discuss things with everyone outside more confidently. Moving on to the next part. There are certain suggestions for developing both speaking and listening skills. So, here, as you can see, what we can do in the classrooms. What kind of activities shall a teacher give to enhance the listening and speaking skills of our learners? So, the first one is divide the class into small groups. So, we should give more and more of interactive small groups, collaborative activities for our learners. What will happen here is they will interact with each other and they will teach each other. There can be a lot of peer learning if we create instances like this for our learners in the classroom. The next one is teachers serve as a good model. So, if the teacher is modeling a behavior, the teacher is showing how to pronounce certain words, how to do model reading, and how, if we are listening to a particular activity, what is the intention, what is the objective, and if all of these things are modeled by the teacher, the students will learn better. We should try to include greetings, request, personal information sharing, stories and experiences and interest of the learner. तो इन हमारे क्लासरूम्स में हम कुछ प्रैक्टिसेस कर सकते हैं, जैसे जब भी बच्चे अंदर आएंगे क्लास में तो वो एक दूसरे को ग्रीट करेंगे, स्टूडेंट विल ग्रीट द टीचर विल ग्रीट द स्टूडेंट्स. All of these things will create instances for us to talk more, to use the language more. And these things will stay with the students. They will also develop various language skills and also value system through this. The next is learn language through situation and activities. Yesterday we were discussing about task-based language teaching. What happens here is we will create a particular task for the students to do, and when the task is achieved, there is certain amount of language objectives which are also achieved simultaneously. So what we should do is we should learn language through certain situation and activities and not in isolation. The next is give individual attention to learners. A lot of the times language classrooms will become a mass discussion, but what we need to do is we need to focus on each individual student, because as we discussed earlier, every learner's space, every learner's challenges are different when it comes to learning, all the more when it comes to learning languages. So instead of ignoring or trying to do a larger group discussions, we should try to give individual attention, individual assignments, individual tasks and opportunities to learners. The next one is allot 1 or 2 periods per section for oral conversation. So, in order for us to enhance the speaking abilities of children, we should give them more opportunities throughout our day, throughout the interaction that we are having in the class. We should try to give them more opportunities. The next one is have a sympathetic outlook towards learners' speaking and listening shortcomings. Another important role or responsibility that lies on the teacher is that we should be open to listening to students. We should be open to the fact that when the students are learning a language, they may have certain shortcomings, they make certain mistakes. It can be grammatical errors, pronunciation errors. So, when that happens, we should be sympathetic to them and we should help them get better instead of ridiculing them. The next is language is the ultimate means of communication. So we have to make sure that our listening and speaking skills are strong. An agreed code exists in all languages according to the culture of its country. So there are various countries and the varied culture that they all have, they are all shared with other people through languages itself. When we try to understand the language of a particular country, we will also get to know more and more about their culture. So these are certain strategies or ways for developing the listening and speaking skills. Coming to the functions of a language. So, what are the important functions of a language? The language will help us develop four skills. The LSRW skills, we looked deeply into two of them right now. Another function of language is verbal interaction. For us to be able to effectively communicate with the masses is one of the important functions of language. The next is the expressive function. Language will help us to express our feelings. If I have certain discomfort, if I am feeling that I need to tell this to someone, I need to share whatever I am feeling with someone, for this we need a particular language for us to be able to express whatever we are feeling to everyone else. The next function is social function and cultural function. How does knowledge get transferred? Like we discussed in our earlier sessions, also, the transmission of knowledge relies heavily on language because most of the knowledge from age old times is being transferred or transmitted from one generation to another orally or in written form, which is how they are doing it. They are doing it using the language. So, language becomes very important here for us to give a social function, the social responsibility of giving the values and culture from this generation to the next generation. Thus, language play a very important role here. And the last function here that we are discussing is communicative approach. It helps us in understanding the phonemes, which is the pronunciation, and the morphemes, the spellings and the grammar of certain words. So what this will do is this will allow us to use language in the most effective manner to actually use it in situation and context when it comes to our daily life. So these are some of the important functions of language. So in the next part, we will see how children will actually use these skills as a tool for their own learning and also for them to sustain in life. So the very first use that children have of language or the speaking and listening skill is to communicate their thoughts, needs, desires and feelings with others. That becomes one of the initial and basic use of language. The next is to maintain relations with society and share their culture. When the child comes forward and share experiences or discuss about certain festivals that they have in their house, language becomes very important here. So they are speaking about their culture or certain practices that they follow at their house. So when they're discussing it with everyone, it will establish a bond between them and everyone else who is also involved in this whole communication process. So one of the use of language and how the children use it is in order to maintain relationships. The next one is to apply words and sentences to communicate and express ideas in stories and poems. When it comes to English language, whenever we see a particular text, we will read it, we will understand it, or we will listen to it, and then we will try to comprehend it. And based on whatever words and sentences we have heard, we will use them to communicate our ideas. So it will enhance our vocabulary and we will be able to apply these words and sentences to communicate better. The next one is to use words as a tool to store information. Whenever we come across certain new words or vocabularies, we may not have a context right away to use them. What we do is we build our vocabulary over a period of time and we pick out words which we would like to store in our memory and use it later on in a particular context where they are more appropriate. This is also another way in which children are using language as a tool. The last one is to develop thinking abilities and generate new ideas. For us to be expressive, for us to be creative, language is a means. That is why it becomes a tool for the children to learn. So, we have discussed a few of important things today. We will now look into certain questions on these topics. So, the first question is, language skills that cannot be assessed through a traditional pen paper test are. So we know we have 4 skills, LSRW skills. So we have the options reading and listening, option 2 listening and speaking, option 3 reading and speaking, and option 4 listening and writing. So from all of these, which two are the ones which cannot be assessed using a pen and paper test, which is what we conduct usually in our classrooms, like the formative assessment or summative assessment. A lot of the times we are conducting pen and paper test. So which skills cannot be assessed through this traditional way of testing? The correct answer here would be listening and speaking skills. Moving on to the next question. Read this particular exchange between a teacher and a student. Teacher, shall we go out to the garden and find out the names of those flowers near the wall? Students, yes, yes, yeah. Teacher, yes, ma'am, please. So the teacher has reiterated the same thing which the student is telling, but in the right manner, and has added certain extra words there in order to change the tone of it. So now what the teacher is doing here? Option 1 relates language function with politeness, makes a polite suggestion to start reading, confirms the student's request, offers an alternative language activity. So these are 4 options. Here we can try the method of elimination. We will eliminate whichever option does not seem appropriate at all. So did the teacher ask the students to start reading? No. So second option is gone. And offers an alternative language activity. Did the teacher change the activity? No. So these 2 options, option 2 and option 4, we will eliminate. Now we are left with option 1 and option 3. So the third option, it is very direct, confirms the student's request. And the first one is talking about how languages work in different situations. The first option here will be the right answer, relates language function with politeness. So the next question is speaker 1. We had an enjoyable holiday this winter. The speaker 2 is asking, where did you go? So the speaker 1 says, where? Speaker 2, yes, which place did you visit? During the assessment of students' speaking, listening skills, marks would be deducted during this exchange for whom? So in this situation, they have given interaction between 2 students. So these 2 students are talking and one of the student is asking, where did you go for your trip? So the speaker 1, it repeats the question, where? So now we have to tell whose marks will be deducted in this particular situation. So in this situation, as we see, the speaker 1 has asked again, where? Which means he or she was not able to hear properly or did not comprehend, even though the speaker 2 has rightly asked the question, where did you go? So the correct answer here would be speaker 1. Moving on to the next question. A speaking activity can be made more purposeful by motivating students to complete a task at the end, providing a specific list of vocabulary to use, insisting on correct structure and pronunciation, and interrupting the activity with some writing or reading. So, as you see, all these four options, they are more or less on the positive side. What we can do is look at them very carefully and start removing whatever is not feeling right or is not appropriate for the particular speaking activity. So, should we be interrupting while the students are doing an activity? No. So, we will remove fourth option. Then we have first, second, and third options with us, motivating students to complete a task at the end. So we will give them a task that they need to perform at the end. So they will be involved in the speaking activity, providing a list of vocabulary to use. Giving a mere list of vocabularies to use in a speaking activity may not be the most appropriate here. The next one is insisting on correct structure and pronunciation. In any speaking activity, it is very important that we have the correct structure and pronunciation. So the right answer here would be the third option, that is insisting on correct structure and pronunciation. So the next question that we have in front of us is, a speaking activity can be made more purposeful by doing what? The options in front of us are motivating students to complete a task at the end, providing a specific list of vocabulary to use, insisting on correct structure and pronunciation, interrupting the activity with some writing or reading. So these are the four options that are given in front of us. इसमें से एक ऑप्शन तो आप हटा सकते हैं. पढ़ते ही हमें समझ में आता है कि एक टीचर को इंटरप्ट नहीं करना चाहिए, वो थोड़ा नेगेटिव हो जाएगा. तो फोर्थ ऑप्शन को हमने डायरेक्टली हटा दिया है. अब हमारे पास बचे हैं तीन ऑप्शंस. उसमें से सेकंड ऑप्शन देखिए, प्रोवाइडिंग अ स्पेसिफिक लिस्ट ऑफ वोकैबुलरी टू यूज. एक स्पीकिंग एक्टिविटी में शुड वी लिमिट the creativity of our learner? Should we limit the purpose of language learning? So we will remove the option 2 as well. Now to think between the first option and the third option, motivating students to complete a task at the end. So we will give them a particular task and expect them to complete that task, and by doing that they will be motivated to do the activity as well. Or the third option, insisting on correct structure and pronunciation. As we know, one of the important aspects of having good speaking skills is to have the right pronunciation and know the correct structures that are needed to form a grammatically correct sentence. So the correct option here would be option 3, insisting on correct structure and pronunciation. Moving on to the next question. Students always find it difficult to listen to and understand a second language presentation inside or outside their class. This can be helped by. तो ये जो क्वेश्चन हमारा आया है ये हमारे सेकेंड लैंग्वेज के ऊपर है, सेकेंड लैंग्वेज लर्निंग के ऊपर है. So when we talk about L1 and L2 in our classrooms and the amount of exposure that is given on those languages outside the classroom, why is it that it is difficult for our students to understand and listen to second language? So what can we do to make sure that it is not difficult, to make it easy for them? So the options given to us here are recommending to choose another language closer to L1, being taught by only native speakers of L2, increasing the number of periods for the second language, practice by using the second language more. So when we talk about language learning, there are certain principles or situations as to how we can enhance them. The first option that we see here, recommending to choose another language closer to L1. This is completely discarding the whole point of having an L2. So we will remove this option. The second option, being taught by only native speakers of L2. There are a lot of languages which are being taught in our schools, in our regions, but we do not have native speakers of that. Should that limit us from actually learning the language? No. So this option also we will remove. The next one is increasing the number of periods for the second language. We did discuss a principle of selecting ratio. So we should not give more importance to the second language alone in the classrooms and increase the number of periods, the workload or the academic load for this particular second language alone. So this would also be an inappropriate option. So, moving on to the fourth one, practice by using the second language more. This is what we were talking about, giving more and more exposure, giving more and more opportunities for us to learn a particular language. So, the right option here will be the fourth option, practice by using the second language more. Moving on to the next question. In order to know the correct pronunciation of English words, the learner should. Now we are moving into a specific particular skill, that is speaking, and we're talking about specifically pronunciation. So to make the pronunciation of a learner better, what is important? Know how to write the words, know the spellings, meanings, and how they are pronounced. Know the meanings only, know the spelling. So these are the four options that are given to us. So now what we need to go back and recall is this particular question is about correct pronunciation, which means it is talking about the speaking skills. For speaking, it is very essential for us to know the word, know the word's meaning, and when it comes together, when these sounds come together, how do you produce it or how do you pronounce it? So clearly, the correct option here would be know the spelling, meanings, and how they are produced. So the option 2 is the correct answer here. Moving on to the next question. Role play is an activity for promoting. So there are various activities that we can do in our classrooms to enhance the language skills, speaking skills, or for that matter, listening skills. One of the activities that is being asked in this question is role play. So this particular active will promote what? Will it promote assessment? Will it promote listening? Will it promote writing? Or will it promote speaking and listening? So one option which we can directly remove is option 1, assessment. Then in role play activities, we do have listening skills. Then do we have writing skills? No. In role play, it is an enactment using certain dialogues or gestures. We are enacting certain roles. We are playing roles of certain characters. So writing is not involved here. So option 1 and 3 are directly removed. Does role play also involve speaking? Is it an interactive activity? Yes. So the correct option here would be speaking and listening. Moving on to the next question. A speech community refers to a community which uses different languages, speaks different dialects, speaks the same language, connects by virtue of a link language. So a community together will be speaking a same language, and this community will be called as a speech community. So the right option here would be speaks the same language. With this, we come to the end of our discussion on this particular topic. And these were some of the important questions that we had with respect to listening skills and also the speaking skills and how we should use them, what kind of activities we can plan in our classrooms. So with all of these questions and the topics that we have discussed today about speaking skills and also the listening skills and how to use it in our classroom, how to address it, how to enhance these skills, what kind of exposure we should give, what kind of activities we should use, all of these things we have discussed and also tried to solve certain questions with keeping seated examination in mind. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. We will meet again in the next part.